Welcome to the future.
Welcome to 1337, the future of podcasts of longevity. I'm Max, your host, and I'm all about exploring the science of living longer.
And I'm Sophia, diving deep into those health hacks and ageless living tips. You know, we're here to uncover the secrets to that vibrant, extended life, all of us.
Absolutely. And today, we're going deep, really deep, into something fundamental to our well-being and longevity.
Dopamine.
Dopamine, you've probably heard of.
Oh, yeah.
But understanding how it actually works.
Yeah.
This could be a game changer for navigating the world we live in today, and for making choices that lead to, a more balanced and fulfilling life.
Exactly. It's all about making those choices that really support a long and healthy life. And to do that, we're tapping into the insights of Dr. Anna Lembke.
Oh, she's great.
She is. She's a professor of psychiatry at Stanford, a leading expert on addiction, and we're pulling from her appearance on The Diary of a CEO.
Such a good episode.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Her work has really brought this crucial topic of dopamine into the public conversation. So we're going to unpack why it matters so much to you.
Love it.
Our mission today is to kind of extract those core principles of dopamine's function and its impact on your everyday life, helping you grasp the forces behind, what makes you desire certain things, your behaviors, without feeling overwhelmed by all the scientific jargon.
Yeah, keep it simple for us.
Right. We'll look at pleasure, pain, motivation, even addiction through the lens of this powerful neurochemical.
It's powerful stuff. So, basic question, what does dopamine even do?
Right. Where do we even begin?
I know.
Well, a great starting point, as Dr. Lembke discussed, is understanding just how essential dopamine is for our survival.
Really?
Yeah, really essential. There was this eye-opening experiment with rats who were engineered to have no dopamine.
Oh, wow.
And they found that if food was placed directly in the rat's mouth, it would eat.
Okay.
But if the food was even a short distance away, the rat would starve.
Wow.
Think about that. The drive to get even the most basic necessities gone, vanishes without dopamine.
So it's not just about the joy of eating, it's the motivation that gets you to the fridge in the first place.
That's exactly. This is big. Dopamine is this chemical messenger in our brain, and it's basically telling us, this is important, you should approach this, explore it, investigate. It's tied to pleasure, reward, and crucially, motivation.
Motivation.
In fact, Dr. Lembke suggests that it might be even more vital for the motivation to act than for the feeling of pleasure itself.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've all had those moments where we want something so bad, but then actually getting it, it's not as thrilling as we thought it would be.
Right, exactly.
So, when we do things that feel good, whether it's eating that delicious treat, getting lost in a video game, or maybe scrolling through social media, what's dopamine actually doing in our brains?
Any pleasurable or rewarding behavior, it triggers this release of dopamine in the brain. And here's a key point. The more dopamine that's released, the more likely that activity or substance is to become, habit forming.
Oh, okay.
Even addictive for some people.
Interesting.
Dr. Lembke also highlighted that there's a significant genetic component to addiction risk, around 50 to 60%.
Oh, wow. That's pretty high.
Yeah. So, if there's a family history, that vulnerability can be higher.
Okay.
The important thing is we want to keep dopamine in a healthy balance for overall well-being.
Balance, yeah. That seems to be a recurring theme. And, Dr. Lembke talked about how pleasure and pain are processed in the same parts of the brain, right?
Yeah, she did. And this was described as one of the most important neuroscience discoveries of the last 75 years.
Really?
The brain regions that process pleasure also process pain.
Interesting.
And they function like opposite sides of a balance scale. The brain's always trying to keep this balance level. Neuroscientists call it homeostasis.
Homeostasis.
It's like your body trying to maintain a stable temperature.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like you said, we're naturally inclined to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Right. And in our modern world, we're bombarded with these readily available pleasures.
Everywhere we look.
I know. Our brains are almost in a state of constant reaction, trying to compensate for all this overstimulation.
It's a lot.
It is. And this is where the problem arises. because to get that same pleasurable effect over time, we often need more of the substance or behavior or more potent forms of it.
Oh.
And unfortunately, that can lead down the path of addiction.
Yeah.
And Dr. Lemke even shared her own experience with becoming, well, really engrossed in romance novels to the point where it became problematic.
Really?
Yeah. And it illustrates that these reward pathways can be hijacked by more than just substances.
So it's not just about the drugs. It's about any kind of behavior that triggers that dopamine release, right?
Exactly.
Wow. Now, there's a lot of talk about dopamine these days.
Sure.
What are some of the biggest misunderstandings you've encountered about it?
Well, one I hear a lot is that dopamine is inherently good.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Another is that you can actually get addicted to dopamine itself.
Oh, really?
But dopamine isn't good or bad.
Got it.
It's just a signal. It provides information about whether something we're doing has the potential to, help us survive. It's also linked to our predictions about how rewarding or pleasurable something will be. Dr. Lemke called it the reward theory of relativity, where pleasure and pain are really relative to one another.
It's all about that balance, right? Like you said, if we tip the scale too far on the pleasure side, our brain tries to compensate.
Precisely. Think of it this way. You pour something into one side of a scale, the other side's going to rise up in response, right?
Yeah.
Dopamine's like that. It gives us a sense of where we are on that scale between pleasure and pain.
Okay.
Every time you experience pleasure, dopamine's released, tilting that scale towards pleasure. But then your brain kicks in. It starts working to bring it back to balance, and sometimes it overshoots. It pushes you towards this temporary state of discomfort.
It's all a balancing act.
It is. That's the rebalancing act. And dopamine plays a key role in that.
So every activity we do probably has some impact on those dopamine levels.
In some way, yeah. Anything pleasurable, reinforcing, rewarding, it's going to affect dopamine. It's the main signal telling us if something's potentially important for survival. Interestingly, even things that are painful or not pleasurable, those can involve dopamine too. Novelty, anything new, unfamiliar, that triggers dopamine release.
Our brains like novelty.
They do. And let's not forget dopamine's role in movement, which we see in Parkinson's disease, which is caused by dopamine depletion.
Right. And, it's fascinating, that connection between motivation, reward, and movement. And Dr. Lemke touched on this, how we've evolved to exert effort for those rewards. But in the world we live in today, a lot of those rewards are just a swipe or a click away.
I know, it's so easy now, and that ease of access is really confusing for our brains, which evolved in an environment where we had to work for even the smallest reward.
Right, we had to hunt and gather and work for everything.
Exactly. So this abundance, this accessibility of pleasurable stimuli in the modern world, it creates a real mismatch with our ancient wiring.
Yeah, we're not wired for this.
No, we're not.
Let's talk more about this idea of dopamine being relative to pain. Dr. Lemke used alcohol as an example with those scales. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So to understand how this pleasure-pain balance actually works, let's look at a common example. Alcohol. Dr. Lemke explained that pleasure and pain are collocated in the brain. They're working like opposite sides of that balance we talked about. When we consume alcohol, it acts on various neurochemical systems, ultimately leading to dopamine release in the brain's reward pathway. This pathway includes areas like the prefrontal cortex and deeper limbic regions like the nucleus accumbens and ventral tegmental area.
Okay, so alcohol hits that pleasure side, releases dopamine. What happens next?
Well, as soon as that dopamine's released, the brain starts working to restore balance. It wants homeostasis. It doesn't want to stay tilted towards pleasure for too long. One way it does this is by reducing dopamine transmission.
Okay.
For example, by making those dopamine receptors less available on the receiving neurons. It's a process called downregulation.
Downregulation.
Think of it like this. The brain has docking stations for dopamine.
Okay.
When there's too much dopamine, the brain starts removing some of those docking stations to reduce the signal.
So the pleasure goes up, the brain brings it back down by making it harder for dopamine to do its thing.
Exactly.
But Dr. Lemke described these, I think she called them gremlins or rocks, hopping onto that pain side of the scale. What are those?
Yeah, those are a metaphorical way to explain what's called neuroadaptation.
Okay.
As the brain's trying to regain balance after that surge of pleasure, that dopamine, it often overshoots.
It overcorrects.
Right. These rocks on the pain side, they represent the brain's adaptations that push us towards feeling less pleasure or even experiencing discomfort. This is the biological basis of a hangover or a come down after drug use.
So that overshoot is why we don't just return perfectly to feeling normal after the pleasure's gone.
Exactly. And there's this evolutionary just so story, as Dr. Lemke called it.
Okay.
In a world of scarcity and constant danger, this mechanism of overcompensating might have been beneficial, making sure we were never fully satisfied and always motivated to seek more resources for survival.
So we'd always be out there hunting and gathering, making sure we had enough.
Right. After getting something rewarding, we'd immediately feel this slight deficit, pushing us to go out and find more.
But now, in a world of abundance, this mechanism can work against us.
It can.
It leads to this cycle of seeking pleasure just to get out of the dip caused by the previous pleasure.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to seek more dopamine, but now we have these readily available synthetic dopamine sources that our brains weren't designed to handle in such excess.
We're overdoing it.
We are. It's this mismatch between our ancient wiring and the modern environment.
So what happens to that pleasure-pain scale in a world where we can constantly get these big hits of dopamine?
If we keep engaging in highly pleasurable activities, our brain's going to keep compensating. Over time, with frequent excessive stimulation, those gremlins on the pain side, they can become almost permanently camped out there.
Oh, no.
This leads to what Dr. Lemke called the addicted brain, where our baseline level of happiness, your brain's baseline level of happiness, contentment, what we call the hedonic set point, it shifts towards pain.
Oh.
Now, we need more and more of the substance or behavior and in more potent forms, not even to get high, but just to feel normal.
And when we're not using, we're walking around with the scale tilted towards pain, experiencing those, universal withdrawal symptoms like anxiety, irritability, cravings.
Exactly. And if someone in that state tries to use enough of their drug of choice to outweigh all those rocks on the pain side, the brain's response is just to add more rocks, more neuroadaptations, leading to this vicious cycle of needing more and more to achieve even a temporary feeling of pleasure or normalcy.
So it's not just a lack of willpower, it's a real physiological change in the brain.
Absolutely. Dr. Lemke emphasized that this understanding fosters empathy, both for those with addiction and for individuals to have self-compassion.
Compassion.
When that scale is tilted towards pain, the drive to restore balance can override rational thought about consequences. People aren't necessarily trying to self-harm, they're trying to escape pain. But the way they choose to deal with that pain can become self-destructive, creating more pain in the long run.
And it's important to remember that we all start at different baseline levels, right? Someone with pre-existing anxiety or trauma might be more vulnerable to seeking external ways to regulate their feelings.
That's a crucial point. Dr. Lemke mentioned that individuals with co-occurring psychiatric disorders have an increased risk of addiction, possibly due to self-medication. However, while substances might offer short-term relief, they ultimately worsen these underlying issues because of how the brain adapts.
Right, it's a temporary fix that creates a bigger problem down the road.
Exactly. And this can also explain why trauma is often linked to addictive behaviors, as individuals seek ways to numb the pain and avoid dealing with difficult realities.
So dopamine, which originally served to guide us towards survival needs, gets hijacked by these artificial rewards that our brains mistakenly interpret as essential for survival.
Yeah, it's like a misinterpretation. And this hijacking explains why individuals with severe addiction might prioritize their drug of choice above everything else, even losing loved ones, homes, jobs. The brain becomes convinced that that substance or behavior is necessary for survival. Additionally, the potency of many modern rewards, they release large amounts of dopamine very quickly, which further confuses the brain, which evolved for a system of effort preceding reward.
We got to work for it.
Right.
Dr. Lemke also touched on how stress can play a role. It seems like when we're stressed, we might be more likely to seek out those quick dopamine hits.
Absolutely. Stress in its various forms, hunger, anger, loneliness, tiredness, it can act as a trigger for seeking out those substances or behaviors that release dopamine. There was this interesting study with rodents. They showed that even after cocaine use had stopped, if the rats were exposed to a painful stressor, they would immediately go back to seeking out cocaine.
Wow.
Highlighting how stress can lead to relapse.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about solutions. For someone who recognizes they might be in a problematic cycle with a substance or behavior, what are some steps they can take?
Well, Dr. Lemke's advice, which she followed herself with those romance novels, is to consider a dopamine fast.
Okay, dopamine fast.
It's not about eliminating dopamine itself, that's impossible and unnecessary, but rather taking a break from that specific substance or behavior that's causing problems. She recommends a 30-day fast
30 days.
to allow the brain to reset and for those withdrawal symptoms to subside.
That's a big commitment. What can someone expect during that time?
Well, it's important to be prepared that things might feel worse before they get better.
Okay.
That initial discomfort is part of withdrawal. However, after about 2 weeks, those acute withdrawal symptoms usually start to improve, and by the end of 30 days, many people report feeling significantly better than they had in a long time. They see a reduction in cravings and a renewed ability to engage with other aspects of their lives. It's really an experiment to see how that substance or behavior is impacting you.
And Dr. Lemke also talked about self-binding. What is that?
Self-binding is a strategy to counteract the power of cravings. It's about putting barriers between ourselves and the object of our desire before we're in a moment of intense craving.
So planning ahead.
Exactly. This acknowledges that willpower alone is often not enough in our hyper-stimulating environment.
Right. We need more than just willpower.
We do. And these barriers can be physical, like locking away devices or removing tempting substances from the home, or even cognitive, like making a conscious commitment and a plan to avoid those triggers.
So it's about proactively managing our environment and those impulses rather than relying solely on resisting temptation in the moment.
Exactly. It's about anticipating those vulnerable states, like being hungry, tired, and having strategies in place to avoid those impulsive decisions that lead to that dopamine crash.
This also connects to the concept of sugar cravings. Dr. Lemke explained how sugar affects the same reward pathways as drugs.
Yes, sugar's addictive.
Really?
It triggers dopamine release and leads to a withdrawal period with intense cravings when we stop.
Just like a drug.
Right. That 2-week cycle of binging and craving is a common experience.
I've been there.
If we can get through that initial withdrawal, the cravings tend to subside. However, re-exposure can quickly put us back into that cycle.
So we've got to be really careful. There was also that really striking rat experiment Dr. Lemke mentioned about cocaine and relapse. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah, that one. So in this experiment, rats were given cocaine daily for a week, and this led to a clear increase in activity. Then the cocaine was stopped for an entire year, a significant portion of a rat's lifespan.
Wow, a year.
And when those rats were given a single dose of cocaine after that year, they immediately went back into the same frenzied activity as they had on day 7 of the initial exposure.
Wow.
It suggests that there's a long-lasting memory of addiction in the brain.
So relapse is a huge risk.
It is, even after extended periods of abstinence.
And this is especially concerning when we think about children and their early exposure to addictive substances or behaviors.
Absolutely. Dr. Lemke emphasized that early exposure can shape the developing brain, potentially setting the stage for addiction in adulthood. The brain undergoes significant development until around age 25. Engaging in those maladaptive coping mechanisms during this time can strengthen those neural pathways.
So we got to be really mindful of what we're exposing our kids to.
We do. But the good news is the plasticity of the young brain also offers a window of opportunity for early intervention and rewiring.
So there's hope.
There is.
Is there anything else about dopamine that we should keep in mind?
Oh, one more thing. Dr. Lemke really wanted to emphasize that while strategies like dopamine fasting can be helpful, they might not be appropriate for everyone.
Okay.
Individuals with severe addiction or those at risk of life-threatening withdrawal from substances like alcohol or benzodiazepines, they should seek professional medical help. It's always best to consult with an addiction medicine specialist for personalized guidance.
Really good advice. So as we've explored today, dopamine is far more than just the pleasure chemical, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's deeply intertwined with our survival, our motivation, and that delicate balance between pleasure and pain.
Right. And understanding this balance and how the brain's constantly striving for that homeostasis, it offers powerful insights into why we seek certain experiences and the potential pitfalls of our modern overstimulated environment.
Yeah. We need to be mindful of all those readily available pleasures and how they might be tilting the balance towards pain in the long run, leading to, well, those feelings of dissatisfaction and craving we're trying to escape.
It's a tricky cycle.
It is. And, this idea that intentionally engaging with discomfort, whether it's through exercise, cold exposure, or other challenging activities, can lead to a more sustainable and balanced release of dopamine is a fascinating one. It suggests that sometimes the most rewarding paths involve a bit of upfront effort.
I like that. And Dr. Lemke's experience with those romance novels highlights that addiction isn't limited to substances. It's those behaviors that trigger dopamine release that can also become compulsive and harmful.
Right. It's not just about the drugs. It's about anything that hijacks those reward pathways.
It makes you really think about your own habit.
It does, with a critical eye.
And finally, this concept of our personal narrative and taking responsibility for our actions, even within those challenging circumstances, it seems crucial for long-term well-being.
Absolutely. And for escaping those cycles of problematic behavior.
We encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with pleasure and pain and how dopamine might be influencing your choices. What small intentional discomforts can you incorporate into your life to find a better balance? What narratives are you telling yourself?
Yeah.
And how might those narratives be shaping your future?
If you want to explore more of this fascinating science of longevity and well-being, visit 1337podcast.com. We've got tons of resources there.
And thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with more insights into living a longer, healthier, and more fulfilling life.
Thank you. See you next time. Strength and honor. I'm Spartacus.
Thanks for watching. Tap into 1337podcast.com.